Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Manon Bolliger, a retired and deregistered naturopathic physician with 30 plus years of experience. Here you will discover engaging and informative conversations between experienced healers, covering all aspects of healing, the personal journey, the journey of the practitioner, and the amazing possibilities for our own body and spirit.
So welcome to the Healers Café. And I have with me Kerri Hummingbird for a second time because we are going to talk about Earth Day, where there will be an amazing ceremony available to everyone who registers, and also her new book, Medicine. Well, she's a medicine woman, mother, and mentor, and is the founder of Inner Medicine Training, a mystery school that shares potent ancient traditions from the Andes and Himalayas for owning your wisdom and living your purpose. So you have other books that are out there and that people can read already, but you have your new book. I'm just looking for it's actually called Inner Medicine, right? Becoming One with Mother Earth for the Survival of Humanity. Kind of poignant times right now for this. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, well, thank you for being here. And where to start? Well, I don't know. Start with why this book and why now? And why don't we just go right to the subject matter?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, when I was feeling into what book I was going to write next, because I knew there was another one coming, what I felt in my heart was this transformation I've been making in my own life into inner medicine rather than looking for the expert out there that had the medicine to like fix me or make my life better or somehow heal my broken parts. It was learning how to come inside and be with myself. And you know, as a teacher of healers, that's what that is. That journey of being a healer is being like the most sacred witness for someone's journey. But the acknowledgement that that person's actually doing the work and that it can't work any other way, like nobody else can do it for you. You're the one taking that journey. And it would probably amaze many people that hire healers to go to learn that, oh, I'm the one doing the healing on myself. Yes, you are the one doing the healing on yourself. It's just that we're opening up a space for you to do that. And we're giving you access to the work, the inner medicine that we as healers have claimed for ourselves by doing our own deep shadow work and our own self-love work and our own nurturing and our own realization work. And that work becomes every time we learn something new, every time we integrate it into our way of being, every time we walk in the world in a new way, we share that inner medicine with everybody freely through our auric field, through the photon beams of light that emit from our auric field and from the voice. And the voice, the thing I love about my journey is listening back to me on the beginning of my journey as a messenger, to my voice and to the resonance of my voice, and hearing the difference, the way that my voice has opened up with that love. Because the more we do self-love work, the more our hearts get connected with our throats. And when we speak, we have this amazing love that just pours out, through the sound that we emit through our throats. And that's how we put love in the world too. So I just think now is a time that kind of like most of the planet is going through what you and I and other people went through like decades ago, when we went through our awakening. And when the light came in and asked us to heal the shadows, and the shadows came up and they were very dark, and it was very dark and cloudy and murky for a while. And we got really interested in healing. We got really interested in inner medicine. And we took the journey. And so this is the opportunity for people now on the planet to do what we did, to go, oh, this is my journey. This is my initiation. This is my awakening. This is the mystery calling me forward to know myself in truth. And in order to know myself in truth, I have to move through all the shadows and the lies. And collectively, we're doing this because the planet herself is shifting us into a higher vibration. So the planet's already doing this. We can go kicking and screaming, or we can consent and accept and allow and work with the earth to ascend human consciousness to the next place. And that's why the book is important at this time.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. So I'm not going to, devil's advocate isn't really the right word, but 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 actually it's apropos in some weird ways.
I hear you already. Okay.
Anyway, inside jokes. No coincidences. But when you're saying that the earth is shifting anyways, you know, to people who are, they're still seeing the trees, they're maybe now they're seeing that the sun is being covered more and more, and you know there's obvious signs, and that there's you know, some atmospheric changes, man-made changes, not so much other ones on that level. And then we're dealing with this whole environmental thing, which, okay, you know, there's plastic in the oceans, and yes, that's a problem, but maybe CO2, we're made of carbon, and maybe that's not the issue. And what are truths and what are lies, and what is it that objectively Mother Earth is saying that you are picking up and hearing?
Oh, that's such a great question. You know, the Mayans have a number of prophecies about this time on the planet. And actually, all indigenous cultures have prophecies about this time on the planet. They all have them. And they're very similar, you know, by the way. But the reason I like the Mayan prophecies is because it talks about the river of scorpions that we have to pass through in order to awaken into this new age. And the river of scorpions is the truth or lies. How do I know what's true? And how do I know what's a lie? And you can tell very clearly that we're in the river of scorpions. Like we've been in that since the pandemic started. Yeah. Okay, so we're in a global human initiation on how can you discern what's true and what's not true. And the answer is, the answers are inside your body.
Yeah.
So that's why I said becoming one with Mother Earth for the survival of humanity, because your body is made of earth. That nobody can dispute. What else are you made of? If you're not made of earth, what are you made of? You know, so you're made of earth. You're part of the planetary system. I think we all can agree you're an earthling. So therefore, in your body are the keys. And this piece came in and it really helped me so much when I realized if my body is made of earth, and the earth is not just an inanimate object floor that I walk around on, but is actually alive and conscious, which I realized during plant medicine ceremonies that opened my consciousness to earth. Wow, that means the earth is actually speaking to me through my body all the time. Like the earth is my teacher. My soul is inhabiting an earth vessel, and the earth is teaching me through this earth vessel many lessons about life and love. And when I started taking that perspective that the earth is conscious and is interacting with us all the time through our bodies, I started listening to my body in a different way. Like when my stomach gets upset, I stop and go, what are you trying to tell me? What's going on? What am I doing? And I take a look. What are my thoughts? Oh, I was getting anxious. Oh, I was starting to push instead of listen and flow. Oh, and then because it's regular. Like if you actually start to listen to your thoughts, you'll notice that the signals are repeatable. You know, It happens every time you do that thing. Like every time I would get anxious or try to force, my body would do the same thing. And the more I try to force, the body would strengthen the signal. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm out of alignment somehow. My body's telling me I'm out of alignment. So how do we know this is actually happening? Listen to what's going on in your body. And I already know the answer, because I hear everybody out there talking about it, the mental health crisis. They can't even have enough licensed psychotherapists to work with people because they're so full, and they're like losing empathy for people because it's an inundation of like so much darkness. They can't even hold it. And I'm like, why don't you call the healers? Because we're sitting around waiting for you. But anyway, over here, there's like legions of healers just ready for this next part, right?
Mhm.
Because once you help somebody realize that their body is, as the book The Body Holds the Score, that their
Yeah.
body is Mother Earth talking to them, and
Mhm.
that they can't ever be separate from the planet because they're made of the planet. So how could you be separate? That's ridiculous. And if you're connected with the planet, you're just connected, just like all the mycelial network and all the mushrooms are connected and the trees are connected. They communicate through mycelium networks, and science has shown this and proven it. So therefore, we're also connected with everything too, and we're not separate. Which means anything I do to myself on my piece of earth and my body is affecting the rest of Earth.
Mhm.
And the planet going through massive changes, it's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is the planet responding to us taking drastically self-limiting actions like polluting the oceans and tearing and burning down jungles and jungle medicine from around the galaxy, by the way, that's in the jungle, like powerful medicine teachers in the jungle don't want to burn that down. All of those things that we're doing, polluting the water, fracking the earth, right?
Mhm.
um, Big piles of pig manure, because we just can't get away from the pig. There's so many examples, and you can't point to one thing because it's a culmination of mentality.
Mhm.
It's a mentality of
Right.
separateness and ego-driven greed and survival and fear and limited thinking, like I want what I want right now in this minute, and I don't care what happens tomorrow or
Mhm.
even in the next hour. That's what we're up against right now.
Mhm. Which we have created by participating in a highly skilled general propaganda, system that has sold us outside good instead of inside good. Like it's interesting, because it's like, where does that start? How when do you begin? I mean, unless you've always been an outsider, which I guess I guess I have. I didn't have a television, so my kids were never exposed to that. So we didn't bring that outside in. But then you have schools, they're little indoctrination centers, and then you have, all this social pressure between kids and opinions and this and that. So the outside finds a way to have a prominent place if you allow it, right? And it's just an endless distraction from that connection, and I was thinking, when you started speaking about this, I was thinking, I was having a very scientific discussion with one of my, I call them children, my adults, well into their adulthood, and trying to be very scientific about the spike, protein, and the science available that shows, and this is in 2020, right, that there's definitely a risk about, spike. And never mind where it came from, who created it, and the engineering and the Wuhan lab and the bioweapon. Forget all that stuff for just a minute. We're just looking at the science of this spike. And after doing the research, where, yes, there appears to be some problems with the spike, there's an avalanche of the solution, right? Which, okay, again, if you do your homework, it came from DARPA. It was, well, the patents existed ages ago. You just got to follow David Martin. You can do the education, but it wasn't all immediately available when you're just opening up the door, right? And I remember saying, because I was a naturopath, I had to give that up. But I said, how do you know? that's what my child was saying to me. How do you know that it's just not right to take anything? And I said, I think that's called like instinct. I've checked in, and it was quite funny because it was juxtaposed to, very limited scientific review. And now we know that all of that was, kiboshed, and there was a whole bunch of, really illegal things that were happening that, should never be allowed, and censorship and blah, blah, blah. But let's pretend it is a perfect world. We're talking about what we see, and what we see compared to what we know. It's two different worlds, right? And one of them, for me, was so much stronger. It was just like, yeah, I can read all that, but my whole essence knows that there's something wrong with this.
Exactly. And that is the shift between external medicine and inner medicine. So it's a decision point between following the mind exclusively or following the heart body, including some mind, right? Heart body, including some logic, some mind, right? It's all of it. It's a totality. And most of the world is following, in the Western world, is following mind only and ignoring everything else. And what I'm suggesting is that inner medicine is following, listening, taking into account all the aspects, the totality of you, what your body is saying to you, what your muscle testing is saying to you, what your the earth is saying to you, what your meditations, right? Your meditations are saying to you, opening up information, what you're hearing, what you're reading, what you're reviewing, who you're listening to, and then really refines like how you're testing that information with your body wisdom, and then coming to a decision that's right for you and being with that decision. And I think part of this is like reawakening intuition.
Manon Bolliger here, and I want to thank you for taking actionable steps towards engaging your healing journey and helping others discover their path by watching, sharing, subscribing, and reviewing these podcasts. Every review and share helps spread the word, these different perspectives and choices and options for healing. And to thank you, I'd like to invite you to sign up to my free 7-sequence email tips on health and healing for everyday life. You can go to healerscafe.com tips. Thanks so much.
As a force of good on the planet,
right?
Because it's been shunned for so long, exclusively why? For disempowerment. But what I want to do at this moment is go, okay, that's interesting. So like there's like they have, created systems. They have created systems so that we would be disempowered, that we would have our intuition cut off. We would have our ancestors cut off from us because it's evil to talk to the beyond, all this kind of stuff. We would have the earth cut off to us because the earth is evil and you can't trust the earth and it's savage. And so don't do that. And then you have to just come to this church and pay your money every week. And, so and then they colonize and actually killed people in the name of religion and God, right? And Jesus, by the way. Took the full banner and like killed all these people because they were indigenous and they were connecting with the earth and using their intuition and looking at things in a very different way. Right. And now that they couldn't kill them off, that wisdom is growing back. That wisdom has been growing back for quite some time, kind of like in really like secret places and held sacred. And now we're ready to share it en masse because the systems are of disempowerment are there to catalyze such a constriction of energy that then at the time of the awakening, which is now, there's like an alchemy that happens through that force of constriction, desiring freedom and truth, and it opens up. So like all alchemical processes require pressure and force in order so that the materials will combust and have friction and transform and alchemize. And we're at the time of the Great Awakening. We're at the time of a whole new species on Earth, of human coming into play, and that's the conscious human. That's the divine human. That's the 3-stranded DNA, the divine wrapped around the 2-stranded DNA. And so we're here at that moment now, and the understandings of science, even science, are bringing us to this revelation through the fact that they solved Einstein's equation, and they found out that, oh, this means that the universe is at the center of every single one of your 75 trillion cells. Well, then in that case, you can't be anything but divine or universal energy, because it's at the center of you and it's animating everything you are, which you already knew. I mean, just watching somebody die tells you that. Like, they're there and then they're not there, but their body's there.
Right.
So, it's like we're moving from this clamped down, controlled, literal 3D, box that's heavy and dense and pokey and really, struggle and difficult and all of this, and all controlled by the mind, into this like expansion energy that's coming through of the divine going, like pushing it apart, and now we're opening up that divine feminine energy, right? The divine feminine of chaos and turbulence and change and motion and diverse forms and expressions and play and sexuality, and the sexual force by itself erupts this thing, right? Because the Kundalini energy is what opens it up, as sex, so we're getting, and I had my moment of that too, where I didn't even know that's what that was, but it was like, as soon as that Pandora's box was open, there was no going back. It was like, nope, not going to put myself back in that cage. And so, some people are got their heads in the sand, like, because I know whatever I know, I can't unknow. Whatever I realize, I can't unrealize. So I'm trying to not realize anything else. And so they just put their head in the sand, trying not to realize anything else. But that's going to get a really uncomfortable place to be, Manon. That's not a fun place to be.
Well, yeah, I was wondering too, how many healers, or either self-identified or others identify them as such, have come through a history of challenges or difficult times or traumas or etc., in order, and it's a retrospective point of view, to be here at the right moment with the right heart set, mindset, and all of it, right? But I'm curious, with the fast awakening that's happening, whether, I'll just say one thing first before the question. Like for myself, at one point in my life and in my awakening, I allowed myself to be in a very repressive relationship because I was an empath, right? And I am, and so I could come up with a million excuses for all kinds of behaviors because my heart could feel the pain of the individual. Doesn't justify the deeds, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's where the growing up into really liberating the oppressed and dismantled sense of self, because at the end of doing that for a few years, you don't know who you are anymore. So I kept saying, I don't even know what my intuition is. I can't hear anything anymore. So a lot of my journey, with plant medicine and with many things, was show me my intuition. Where's my intuition? Like, it's gone, right? So there was a really a difficult transition, which thankfully I am completely through at this stage. But my question is, it's kind of like the hero's journey. There's this thing we had to go through, blah, blah, blah. And I have this feeling that now it's not needed. It's almost like it may have been needed, and I don't know your story, whether there was also a journey of this nature, but is it needed for people to flourish and embrace the new world? Do we
That's a
really need that?
that's a really good question. And I have an answer that's for me it was necessary. That was my life journey.
Mm.
Okay? So but I like to refer to Dolores Cannon's work on this because in her work of QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis technique, she was interviewing and guiding thousands of people through hypnosis states to connect with their soul state of mind, their subconscious, to access information like Akashic records, almost, right, about their past soul lifetimes and what they're here doing in this lifetime. And that's where she started learning about, oh, the first wave. I'm here. I'm a first wave, or I came from this other planet, or whatever. I'm a second wave. And that was the last book I came on here about, was the second wave, transcending the human drama. But in that for Dolores Cannon was a first waver, and I'm part of the second wave. And from my intelligence, the second wave is me through like my 23-year-old son. There's a lot of like traveling through the darkness, through the dark night of the soul, really like deep roots in the earth, healing ancestry, being part of what I love Richard Rudd talks about with the gene keys is that, when creation happened and it split off into all these fractals, these three fractals, and then the three fractals fractalize and fractalize and fractalize. And so when we bring fractals that are opposing together, they create a lot of friction and combustion, like we were talking about. That's why opposites attract, and, you meet somebody who's like, it's just like, it's this explosion, and it's so hard to manage the tension of that. And what that friction is about is actually cleansing the fractal line. It's a reharmonizing of the energy. It's a built-in harmonizing of the energy that happens when they come together, which is why we're often seduced into having, karmic relationships with somebody that's like explosive like that. And I had one of those. And so we first wave and second wave have been doing deep work on that, like diffusing the tension, so to speak. And so what I'm noticing now is, there's some light beings like the third wave, some coming in that don't have to do like the deep dive stuff. They're just showing up like, what are you guys doing? They look back at me and say, why are you talking about that? That's not, you just like get on with it. Like start making the plans and start building the structures. And they're not deluded at all. They're just like, like the little girl talking to the UN. I can't remember her name, but the one that's like really hard. Yeah. And she's just like, you need to do a better job. And this is what you need to do. And like, we need to do this. And we need to make sure everybody's fed. I mean, they're just coming in. Like, it's very clear to them. Like it's clear as day. And they're just like, but that is happening, I believe, because the first and second wave have been doing like this massive cleansing of the fractals. And so it's a big deal what we signed up to do, right? That's not an easy task. But that's, look at the turning of the ages, right? So in the turning of the ages from the Piscean, the whole energetics around the Piscean age was like so masculine, domineering, controlling, polarized, women versus men, and different tribal cultures versus other tribal cultures. And this like colonization that happened, and the wars, and you're going to do things my way because my way is the right way. That's like all Piscean age stuff, and we're transitioning into the Aquarian age. It's got a very different energy. So we are the ones that came and said, I'll sign up for that task. That's interesting. I want to be in a body at that time on Earth and see like what that's like to transition between completely different ages and different energetics. So, I think we're just in a mass. I think it's all orchestrated. So the Piscean age also has like that victim, rescuer, perpetrator triangle thing. Right. Jesus is the ultimate savior. Satan is the ultimate, perpetrator, and then humans are just helpless in the middle, like we can't do anything about it, we don't know what to do. So we're moving out of that into like, no, grow up, you're a sovereign. Like, are you kidding? How many lifetimes have you had? Stop telling that story. You've had like 100,000 lifetimes, please show up. So and that's what this new generation is like, what are you talking about? You're like ancient, quit this, like show up, be real. And they're just like down to business, so I think that, I think those of us in our age, in the first wave and the second wave, we've done so much work. We kind of want to be applauded for it, but there's like life, the river of life just moves on. It's like, thank you very much, going, it's done, whatever.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's interesting to watch. No, but I often felt, why do we you know, it's like body pain, you know, it's a teacher until you've gotten that lesson, right? And it's the same emotional pain. It's kind of the same, you know, but do we really need that piece? I don't think so. You know?
Well, actually, I want to answer that question a different way. So you were talking about like body pain versus emotional pain, right?
Mhm.
And so, well, the first brain is reptilian.
Right.
Reptilian brain is all about body and reaction, right? And it's about mind, body, and reaction. It doesn't have emotion and heart. It's separated. Much of humanity was in reptilian brain, right?
Yeah.
And then the limbic brain started opening up, and all of a sudden they had these really messy things called emotions, and they're like, I don't know what to do with that, and everything's like wonky, and it's up and it's down, and it's like unpredictable, and I'm reacting, and and so that emotional brain, once you kind of transmute that, the opening of that energy, the opening of that functionality, I guess functionality is a good word, functionality in the human experience, then you modulate it. You just you're transmitting that now everywhere. And so it's much easier for people to catch on to it because you're emanating the light rays of already having embodied that. So there's tons of empaths on the planet right now, and they're all complaining about the narcissists. And it's like, listen, the narcissists are just using the reptilian brain. They haven't opened their limbic brain yet. So stop like judging them. They just
Yeah.
they don't know what you're talking about. They literally don't know because they haven't opened up their limbic brain yet and their heart's not open. So they don't know what you're talking about. They just think you're like weird, because you're not matching their reality. And we're actually here to stay and have presence with them as much as possible because I know it's annoying. But like open up the heart, open up compassion, open up
Yeah.
understanding, help them open that limbic brain up. And once that limbic brain opens up, they're going to be in Sacred Sons. They're going to be in Mankind Project. They're going to be all over the place. Like, oh my God, like what is going on inside of me? And I hear men saying that now. They're like, I didn't even know what this thing is, this emotional stuff. But we have to go through the limbic brain to get to the frontal cortex.
Yeah.
And the frontal cortex is where awakening happens. That's where, and then the corpus callosum, and then the little tiny room, like the upper room, as Paul Selig calls it. We want to get to the upper room. The only way through is through those dang emotions. You can't get there otherwise. If you're not heart open, you're not going to get to the upper room.
Yeah. Kerri, we have actually run out of time, but
Oh, dang!
I wanted you to just just finish with a few words about the 22nd, and also how people can get your book, or
all that stuff.
Tell us.
Awesome. Well, here's the book. It's very pretty. Inner Medicine, Becoming One with Mother Earth for the Survival of Humanity. Notice it's a very serious title, but it's a really pretty picture. So it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. You can pre-order it and get invited to our free sacred ceremony to honor Mother Earth on April 22nd. It's a global ceremony unless you're in Austin. It's a global ceremony at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern, and 12 p.m. Pacific. And if you're in Austin, there's also details for that ceremony in person. And all of that is at kerrihummingbird.com, KERRI, hummingbird.com/inner medicine, all one word, inner medicine.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming back on and sharing that.
Thank you.
I've already joined, so look forward.
Yay! Awesome. Thank you so much, and blessings to everybody that was listening.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Manon Bolliger. Continue your healing journey by visiting thehealerscafe.com and her website, and discover how to listen to your body and reboot for optimal health.